really is I think change the agenda. Bruce needs to himself on the move away, and generally we find that new members, Bruce is important from a delivery perspective with our item 4.2, which is the non-financial quarter 3. So what I'd like us to do is to go straight to item 4.2. We'll come back to 4.1 after we've dealt 4.2. And me, thank you for being here. Perhaps you'd like to give us salient points from your report.
Yes, sure thing. Thanks, Bruce. So just letting you know about the time period that this quarter 3 report covers. It covers from the start of the financial year up to the end of quarter 3. So it's 1st of July 2022 up to 31 March 2023, and it obviously includes the storm events in January and February. That's all I'll say for now. And take any questions or first we take questions about
In our good standard form, we got the summary. I shouldn't even put a biscuit in my mouth, should I? Well, one of our agendas, then obviously detailed one. Do I have members wanting to make? Well, Bruce, seeing we've got you, any key comments you'd like to make? You probably know the ones we're going to focus.
Yeah, so I guess all my comments would be obviously everyone understands a fairly challenging few months of the third quarter period that that everyone went through around weather and everything else, all the challenges that have stretched resources. Overall, I think it's a pretty good result with the 9 months, the year to date. But obviously there are a few little matters that we will keep working on in a few areas where we may not have been as successful as we may have liked to be. But overall, I'm fairly comfortable with where all the operations have got to, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Are there any questions that folks would like to raise to me or for Bruce? Perhaps he's picked it. Looks like you want to grab the song with
Bruce, when I looked at the
ask which Bruce. Bruce. Oh, okay.
Bruce, when I look at for instance, the parks and reserves.
Yes.
The performance for Thames versus the performance for Mercury Bay, just as for instance, there seemed to be a huge variation. And I wondered whether we're having equity of service being delivered. It seemed that the performance of Thames was really good, and the performance of Mercury Bay was poor around parks and reserves.
Yeah, so through the chair, good question. My answer to that would be obviously it's one contract across the district, but obviously they break it up and service it from the different areas. The other comment I'd make is that the wards have quite different assets and facilities, and so that changes things. But I know that rec services have had a number of challenges around staffing. They've had a little bit of a change out with some management. And particularly around some of their teams and their foreman supervisor roles on the ground. So it could just be related to that. The other thing I'd say is that we do try and make sure we have a consistency of approach in the way that we audit their performance. But again, under Derek Thompson's Parks and Open Spaces team, he's got different staff in his team. They do rotate around to try and get some continuity, but you are going to get I suppose you're always going to be subject to some variability across those types of things, but they do sit down and work through them as a team with the contractor, so there shouldn't be too much of that.
Okay, so I guess that at the high level, you would be confident that we are equitable in our delivery of service in these particular areas. But that's our intention.
That's definitely the intention across a district, because it is a district contract, but it is a little bit of a different one in that it's a district contract, but obviously the 5 wards have it's all locally funded for each ward, so and there's been historically there has been quite different expectations, I suppose, and different service levels to some degree across those 5 different areas, and so that does I would say that does have a bit of a impact across the 5 different areas, and so I think that is just another complicating factor of the Thames Coromandel district, in that it's never quite as consistent as you might expect it would be.
Thank you for that. Kerry?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to raise, Bruce, if I can, around obviously stormwater. We're talking performance measures there. The single flooding event in mid-February during the unprecedented rainfall of Cyclone Gabriel doesn't really reflect the actuals. It may be, I don't know how they've measured this in terms of recorded flooding, but I know that the fire brigade pumped out 25 houses, and so getting the information in a reliable method in terms of looking at networks is difficult looking at these information on these pages.
Yep, that's a fair comment. I suppose there's what I would say, my response to that would be there's a number of levels to that performance measure. The first level would be that it's around habitable floors. So obviously fire brigades around the district do a great job of responding when people call. They can respond and end up pumping out properties where the water hasn't actually got into a building yet, but it's getting close. They can respond to pumping out buildings on a property such as garages, which aren't considered habitable. And then obviously there will be some habitable floor areas that they do end up pumping out, because that was an unprecedented event for the district. So you do have those levels before you even get to kind of what would be considered an event which would trigger that performance measure. And then obviously, as we've spoken about at various forums, we're then reliant on people calling us and putting through the request saying, I've got water in my house, and then a job being logged. Obviously, during a time of that kind of pressure, when people are quite panicked and worried, they often will, obviously, understandably, the correct thing is call the 111 in the first instance and get the fire brigade out. So that's their priority, doing that rather than calling council and saying, hey, I've got water in my property. Once things have sorted out and moved on, obviously people don't usually call back, and say, by the way, I just want to let you know I had water in my property 3 days ago. So it is a challenge, and as I think I've included in the comment there, Councillor Walker, obviously you're aware that we're working with yourself and the community on the Whangamata Stormwater Project. We are talking to the fire brigade to get data from them regarding certain areas, not properties, but areas and streets where they've had issues where they had to go and pump out properties. So that would be my kind of long-winded, answer to that question.
So I could just comment on that, Bruce, and it's really around the fact that we take this information when we're looking at networks, stormwater networks, and whether they're resilient or not resilient, and deciding where money's spent. And that's the bit I'm trying to get through this, is if we needed actual data, it doesn't happen on the day, doesn't need to happen on the day, but there's a follow-up to it. But there are, as you know, concerns about people logging in information on their floors being flooded and going on a LIM report. So it's all about getting accurate information to decide whether networks are working or not. So that's what I'm trying to raise here, is how do we get that accurate information?
Sure.
Yes, Simon.
$1. It's $2. So my comment is the one that I've made every time we receive these quarterly reports, and that is the importance of the measure that we set. So, this measure was set by the previous council and the previous LTP, and it is what we report against. So taking Terry's point that perhaps our measure is not right, our measure is not capturing the information that the council is looking for. So please hold that thought. And when we come to the part of the LTP on our snake, when we talk about performance measures, let's have a really good discussion about what you want collected and how we can collect it at that stage.
It's the mandatory measure.
Oh, bugger.
Okay, nice try.
I think we can have additional measures.
Yeah, I
to
think-
capture what we want.
I mean, I think that's right. I think there's two things here, and I'm really grateful for Bruce in the way that you put on this one, because it does reflect and hint exactly at Terry's point. It's difficult through a simple measure like this to know really what happened on the ground. And indeed, I hear your point, Terry, about the need for accurate information so that you can make pragmatic governance decisions around what to do in certain communities. I'm also conscious that this is important for our annual. And I don't think we should be hidebound by, that number. We know clearly what we're saying is a level of underreporting. We should be prepared to say that and the reasons why and why people, what response times were, etc. So I think we just have to accept the situation we're in and report it faithfully as well. Having said that, I absolutely take Terry's point that from if you're developing policy, if you're driving your capital program, we're not going to be relying entirely on this meeting. There's going to be other information we can try and find. So that's a really good point. Any other questions from the performance position here? Right, comfortable? Bruce, I just had one question. And I'm asking now because I actually want to go back and find the answer because I feel like I should know the answer and I don't. The compliance with some other ROI's standards, and Carl, our auditors, raised the issue we should find out where DIA are at and where Tomato ROI are at in terms of perhaps the overall intent about showing good quality is in contrast to the changing nature in the way in which we report. Do we have any idea where that's going? Are we going to be able to report on our water quality, etc., and under what basis the kind of annual?
Yes, so through the chair, what we're doing in the absence of having that absolute kind of certainty, we're carrying on with the independent assessment of our data, and we're doing that quarterly at the moment. And so I know that our water services manager was speaking late last month with the consultant that we're using, who we ended up using last year, but where the data is going through every quarter to him, and he is going through and doing that independent assessment and review so that we have that surety over the data for our own surety, and to obviously make sure we can comply with anything we need to with Tomato ROI and any questions that may come from Audit New Zealand.
Okay, thank you. Any other one? Please go ahead.
Quick one, if I may. Bruce, district plan. I know that we can't lead back until all the appeals dealt with, and there was 72. Can you give us a quick snapshot of where that sits at the moment in terms of getting it finalised?
Through the chair, I probably can't actually. So, yeah.
So Leslie's here, and Leslie can answer.
Welcome, Leslie.
Just a quick update on the district plan. We have 7 appeals over new topics still outstanding. We are going to we are in the High Court with the appellants next week on one of those appeals. The appellants, there was a decision, an interim decision from the Environment Court. The parties, not the council, other parties to the appeal the Environment decision to the High Court on points of the law. So that is being heard next week in the High Court. On the other 2 main appeals, we are in discussion with, we have a draft consent order on one appeal. I'll see that with the other parties. And again, on the other appeal, we are doing some further research as directed to settle. And in fact, we have a report in here to request that we make the district plan partly for few months. Just to get us almost there. We could declare that we could adopt that plan's partly. That's our intention.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this stage? Thank you, very useful. And as Aileen said, really important that we keep up monitoring these and your long-term plans go there. Whether you want to really back to the first question, if we get out of the service right, keep part of your discussion. So it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. But could we please move to the resolution, which is that we received. Thank you, Peter. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry. Motion, please say aye. Aye. Carry. Thank you very much. Thanks, Meg. Appreciate it. Bruce, thank you for that. Appreciate you being here, buddy. I totally understand. Can we just move now back to 4.1, which is the policy? And who's leading us off? Oh, g'day, how are you? Could always look to the screen these days. So real people, I know you're real, but could always what I'm saying.
And just by way of introduction, if I can, this report originally came to the leadership team as a management policy. And when it came to the leadership team, we said, well, actually, hang on, this is governance also.
Yeah.
So the policy you have in front of you is sort of a blend of governance and management, which is not something we normally do. We normally have quite clear separation, but we're one organisation. It's the same. It needs to be the same approach. And Dean has taken some time to amend it to try and make it more governance relevant, but that's why it's sort of a mix of the two, and I hope that's acceptable to council. It seems silly to have two policies.
Absolutely, it's good. Dean, welcome to the meeting. Appreciate you being here. Any comments you'd like to lead us on as we consider that?
No, good morning, committee. I think Aileen's covered most of what I was going to say. One last point I would make is that the policy has been working well, and it's been reviewed by the leadership team, finance, the risk and assurance manager, and also the Office of the Auditor General. Happy to take any questions.
Brilliant, that's great. Okay, very valuable. Yeah, quite good questions. Pretty sensible, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay, do I have anybody prepared to?
I'll do that.
But you got having read what the recommendations are. No, to receive, we recommend council adopts it because we can't directly, but they need to know it's come through us. And I don't think we need to worry about three. There's going to be minor changes. So being well done, and for that sort of quality process to be through it, that's good. So Len and John, I think moved in. Oh, Terry, you've got a question. Sorry, Terry, my mistake.
Oh, that's all right. I just wanted to make a point, really. I got no problem with the policy and how it's placed out. I would just like to think if we're going to bite it to Tangihanga on that the koha is spelt more, is offered more around food as opposed to cash, but it's just my little comment. But the rest of it, I feel comfortable with.
That's not my experience.
Last century anyway.
That's my point, John.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just want to speak to that and say that the tikanga is to discuss with the iwi or the marae and see what best suits them. We can't make a blanket policy on that.
I'm not making a blanket point. I'm just saying that if there is kai involved, would that be an opportunity to look at as that as a koha doing it that way as opposed to cash? Because they need to buy the food.
Excuse me, just my understanding, somebody else might want to put me right. You can't take food into the marae. Koha's normally given at the welcome and stuff like that. And when I've taken food for tangi and stuff, I've always gone around the back to the kitchen area and presented it there. The koha, totally different thing altogether, Terry, where that's given at the welcome, the potpourri. You're not going to look good walking up there with a leg of lamb dropping at the feet of the iwi, I don't think.
I'm not asking for that.
If I could, in practice, we probably do both.
Yeah.
So food at the back door at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the courtyard.
And indeed, I think we've got a policy allows for combination of both. So
Yeah.
Dean, can I just ask one question, please? Which I should have actually said before I got to your motion, Len. Do we report back on koha given anyway?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair, for the question. Within the policy, there's an Appendix 1, which is a form that's filled out within the finance team. And so all of those forms are recorded, so they can be reported back to the leadership team or to council as required. So those forms are all kept by finance.
Brilliant. So we can justify Look, the reason for my question, Dean, and it's probably ailing as a broader issue around even sensitive expenditure, but often committees, perhaps once a year, will review, well, probably sensitive expenditure once every 6 months, but cohort probably once a year. Just the reasons of our settings, the decisions that we have made. I'm comfortable with the process is good, it's good policy, you've got form, la 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 la. There's often accountable with that capacity for periodic check of our use of the policy and settings as well.
Can I just check in with that? So I am used to doing a quarterly report on Koha,
Yeah.
but it's governance Koha, quarterly report.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, but quarterly seemed, sometimes we had nothing to report, so.
Well, I've probably seen more variations thereof.
Yeah.
It could be annual or it could be quarterly, it could be 6 monthly on rather big roads. Yes, John.
Just one thing, and it's to do with the cohort. I mean, I felt a little uncomfortable having the set amounts because cohort is supposed to be cohort. I was a little happy to see that you could actually increase the cohort depending on the status of the person that was on the marae or whatever, so because there's some flexibility. In my opinion, the cohort was set quite light. But hey, I can live with that. But yeah, I just felt uncomfortable with it being set, but I understand the reasons why it probably has to be better. A little flexibility would be good.
Generally, there is, I would have thought, argued there was flexibility.
No, the numbers are set.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the numbers are set, but within it, there's a flexibility over
The status of the.
the absolute amount that's set.
Hmm.
Okay, Dean, yes.
Yeah, just through the chair, just in response to that question, 9.4, they're deemed appropriate amounts, and 9.5 says that there are circumstances where the chief executive can approve greater amounts. So there is flexibility there, and generally, someone like Frank Form, our navigator, would sort of work with the leadership team just to establish what would be appropriate for any given scenario. And also, I just note that in 11.2, there is 6 monthly reporting to the leadership team, which goes to the question that was posed earlier.
Yeah, I think on reflection, and thank you for that. I'll let John comment on the 9.45. I just reflect, Aileen, as quite rightly mentioned, I think it would be useful for the council, for the committee to see governance over on a similar reporting side. So I would like to suggest that we make.
I was reading.
John, was there any comment you wanted to make to those points of 9495?
No, I knew they were there. And yeah, I'm comfortable there'll be some flexibility by the CEO. Whatever, it's just seeing the numbers in black and white, you know.
I share the distance, but
Yeah.
when you've got an organisation as big as this one, with varying levels of cultural competence, you've got to do something.
Yeah, that's a line. I appreciate that. It's a good job, Dean, though. It was good.
My mover.
Oh, he moved it, I said.
You seconded. I suggest John, you might move it. We might.
I can move it.
And I think, thank you, Rita, appreciate that. I think we do need to go back to the motion and add back, and sorry, Donna, number 3, delegate to group manager outcomes to make minor amendments and breaks it just around that little bit of disclosure. But I would recommend from the governance side, which would just cover that off.
Yep.
That's okay.
That's fine.
John and Rita, thank you. So I'll put the motion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rightio, on to the debtors report, please. Donna.
Yes, if just committee to bear with me for the next 2 reports because Hayden's away this week. So the debtors report that you've got in front of you there. I guess the main thing that I want to talk to the committee about and make them aware of is that, you know, we have obviously over the last year or so really worked hard on reducing debt. You can probably see that the prediction, if you look on page page 148, the historical outstanding rates debt balance. So if you have a look at that one, and then you'll see the green bar to the right there. We're sort of estimating that the debt's going to be higher, but higher than what we have had, or starting to creep up again from what we had say last year, where we got them really low. I think overall this is a reflection of the economy of the times that we're in as well. People are really struggling out there to pay their rates, and we are noticing that by our debt's, becoming a little bit higher after our rating instalment. So that's where we're estimating that we'll be at year end. But I'm happy to take any other questions on the report.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that. Thank you for setting the page. Questions, comments? The green bit says green uptick, it's not an uptick, but the green rise is probably, is probably credible in the situation. It's been any increase in application for emissions.
No, sorry, yes, we did quite a few emissions in regards to the red sticket or yellow sticker properties that from the effect of the cyclones. And so there has been, quite a big uptake with that. I don't think we've seen a huge increase in arrangements to pay yet, but that will come, because what will happen is, once the debt starts rising, then those people get contacted, and of course that's one of the things that we offer straight up, is the arrangements to pay. So I think we probably will see an uptake in that over the next couple of months.
Yes, Terry.
Yes, Donna, just around, can we go to the next page on development contributions? You have to talk about that? I just really want to know how that's tracking. I see the numbers there. Is there income flow through from that going to increase or decrease?
Sorry, I'm only here looking at the debtors report, Terry, so I'm not sure on the actual income side of it. But basically, with development contributions, managing it with debtors, it's a bit trickier, because they have to pay. They can have. We can have the development, we build them for the development contributions, but they don't actually have to pay it straight up. So that's why we sort of see, like we've got the 2-month debtors. So generally people don't pay it till they are completed their project, which is when they're picking up their 224C, because they have to pay their development contributions before they pick that up. So it really depends on the subdivisions that we've got in the district and train, and where they're at in regards to actually being, developments being finalised.
Okay. Okay. So, so you can't give me a trend. That's fine. I was just interested, that's all, to see how they were tracking. But yeah, I see your point. Okay. Yep. It's just in the process of being collected when they pick up their 224s or whatever it is. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, thanks, Bruce. So, look, I'm impressed with what the finance team has done, getting those debts in, Donna, and I do see the green one going up, and you say it's a sign of the times and affordability. So with the proposed rate increase that we're going out with, what would you be thinking, that it was going to probably get worse than better? Does you take into account that when you did that little green line?
I have the crystal ball, but basically what's been taken into account for this one is where we're sitting, like sort of now at this time of the year after our last rates instalment notice, which was just very recently. So the team have looked at that to see what's been paid and what's outstanding after the due date, and so that's how they've come up with that prediction.
So that's at this point in time.
Yes, that's
how not a prediction into
the future.
Into the future.
Yeah, we haven't looked at or estimated the 23, 24 yet, which will be
the one on top.
What will impact of our rates increase, but. Yeah, I think there is going to be some challenges, I think, in ability to pay. Based
on your statement before about affordability and what have you.
And I think also, what this district has experienced with the cyclone and how it's impacted on the businesses and people's jobs and things like that. I think that's all part and parcel of,
Yep.
and it's going to be reflected
Thanks, Don.
when our debts.
I think that that's the reason John asked about questions. I think we have to maintain our, I mean, just gets emphasised that every time we have to serial plan, we know which way the race is going, that we are good communicators of all the different ways in which people
Yeah,
to make and to make it easier on them and their budgets. I know the absolute moment can't change, but how they pay can be obviously.
yeah.
And we will be bringing the rates remission policy back through the LTP process too for a review. Excuse me, I think we've got a pretty good policy. Interestingly, we haven't had any uptake of the financial hardship remission,
We have none at all. Wow.
but the criteria is quite steep.
Is that, okay.
So, yeah, so that's something that we can look at when we go through and review that policy.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. We have any other questions on the next report? No, can I ask if we received, please? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Barry. That's great. We received a report. I'll put the motion, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Those again, carry. Move the treasury report, please. Fine.
Our external debt is still at 67 million, which it has been for majority of this year. It's a budgeted external debt for the annual plan for the end of this year was 92 million, so it's quite a lot less than what we had anticipated that we'd be borrowing, and that's as a result also of our of where we are with our capital works program as well. So the report is about 4 pages in here of graphics. You can see on page 152. Oops, now. On 152, you can see that we've adjusted for the green waters or affordable waters, as it's called now, moving to July 2026. Right, I've just lost my file, so I'm going to open it again.
You've got a question, Martin.
Yes, Martin. Well,
Just you mentioned page 152. So on the left-hand side there, you've got debt forecast, LTP 67, debt forecast 80% of LTP 67.
Sorry, I've just got to get back to the agenda.
And then the third one's Longwood Fan and Three Waters. Oh, I guess that's 7 because.
Yeah, so you can see that. So that's so that's our current state. That's our current forecast. We're not anticipating borrowing any more money.
Right.
What we've got now to the end of this financial year. That's what that means.
Yes, Stephen, but Donna, if I may, so where you say that you, the forecast based on the Three Waters, is that in agreement with DIA? Is that based on the discussion?
So that's basically all the information that we've given to the DIA of what we anticipate our debt, our Three Waters debt will be at that point in time.
And an agreement from them that is going to be covered. So are we still in negotiations?
Well, we've been through the process with DIA of confirming the process and confirming how we will account for that and how we'll get the transfer over. So it just, so an agreement, yes, we have. It might not be that necessarily that amount, will be whatever amount it is at that particular point. We're still. That was in saying that when we did have that meeting with them, that was when we were still with under the old legislation. So with the new legislation, I'm sure there's going to be another round of how it's going to transition over because with the timeline change, but also with going from the 4 entities to 10. I think there might be a slightly different process, but we're still waiting to hear for them, and I think they are still working through that themselves on how that's going to work.
That goes back to that discussion we had earlier on about levels of uncertainty and nobody knows the future, but are you comfortable that there's a level of agreement between us and DIA? And I guess this goes across all the other councils as well, that there's a level of comfort that we're on the same page.
Yes, we are on the same page. I think the uncertainty is around how it will work, what that transition period will be and how that debt will transfer.
So we'd have to assume that roughly half our debt, well, of course, you're looking forward and I guess it's changing. Roughly half our debt relates to the three waters. So that if we'd gone to 114, we would have got ourselves, see it's 60 odd million relates to water related. Yeah. Obviously it's changed, but so I'm tracking on the 8% line, back in 67. You question whether we'd ever be 14. So it's a forecast at this stage, and it's going to change. Go on. Sorry, Terry, you've got a question?
Yeah, I have, just to make note, page 154 down the bottom, the swaps with the ANZ. Our biggest investment, $7.5 million, matured on the 10th of June, and it was a 5.85% interest rate, which was pretty attractive. Donna, when that gets reinvested, what kind of interest rate would you expect that money to attract?
Yeah, so currently our current weighted average fixed rate, as you can see, there is 3.6%, which is pretty attractive. Interest rates are going up, but we have also got some really good interest rate swaps in place, which what that does is it actually smooths out any of those big spikes and interest rate increases.
That was quite a good interest rate, that one in 14, though, wasn't it, when you look back now?
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, any other questions folks would like to raise? With respect, I'm not seeing the sale of airport shares impact.
Wish we had some.
You got to own them, mate. You got to I could sell some. I could sell something. Yeah.
I'll call the question.
Okay. Right, can we go to the resolution, please, just to receive treasury? Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Peter. I'll put the motion, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. Thank you very much. Right, we at that point where we need to move into the public exclusion.
I'll move.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Billy. So I wanted to check, I always like to take this slowly. We're doing minutes, we're doing litigation report, and I may have a verbal update as well. We're getting a little MPX.